it just seemed a little bit bizarre to me that the palace announced while Harry was back in the UK that this ceremony would be taking place on May the 13th, and it feels a bit like a humiliation for Harry, and that somebody's sort of sticking the knife in.
Today, I'm joined by Richard Palmer, a royal correspondent with decades of experience covering the royal family. Richard, hello. Such a pleasure to have you.
Hi, Kate. Thanks for inviting me.
Well, this week obviously marks 1 year since King Charles's coronation. How do you think he feels about his first year since that point? Obviously, he's been on the throne longer than that, but how do you feel?
Yeah, well, I think probably a bit frustrated, although in the last few days, obviously, he's been able to go out again on public engagements, and he talked about sort of being let out from his cage on a visit to military barracks on Thursday. I mean, my own sense is that he got off to a much better start than many people expected at the start of his reign. Mm-hmm. And, I have to confess, I thought there might be a few problems because, if you remember back to 1997 when Diana died, the monarchy was in crisis. And even when Charles announced he was going to get married to Camilla, there was a lot of uproar about it, and I think quite a few royal watchers thought there might be trouble. But
and how would people
react to
him being head of state? Yeah,
exactly. But in fact, there was a really smooth transition, and I think he judged it perfectly. I think the monarchy. I mean, many years ago, a courtier said to me that the British monarchy, it's a bit like a jar of Marmite. The trick is that you have to change with the times but appear to be timeless and to be the same old product that you've always been. And actually the Marmite jar has changed numerous times over the decades.
The branding has changed slightly.
It's changed slightly,
but not to put off those loyal customers.
Exactly.
And you either love it or hate it, I suppose, which is always the kind of the thing with Marmite, isn't it?
Yes.
Having said that, there's quite a lot of people who just think, it's fine. People don't feel that strongly always towards the royal family.
No, you're right. I mean, I think I think people abroad often don't quite understand how indifferent a lot of people in the UK are towards the monarchy. It's not that they're hostile, and it's not that they're ardent monarchists. There are those sets of people, but there are an awful lot of people in the middle who think that if they're pushed to think about it, they think, well, it's probably makes us a bit different to a lot of other countries, and if push came to shove, I'd rather have it than not have it. But they don't think all the time about it, and I find this on social media sometimes. I'm sure you're the same. You get shouted down from all quarters, but I try to explain that a lot of Britons won't know the names of the members of the royal family, not all of them anyway. And certainly I've had my hair cut before, and a woman's been saying, oh yeah, but he looks lovely. What's that boy called? Kate's son, and thinking about George, the future king, and the ardent monarchists in the US and elsewhere, I think sometimes don't get the British attitude towards the monarchy. Anyway, I've sort of veered off a little bit, but
no, it's fascinating. I think. Yeah. Well, I think you've seen Charles as Prince of Wales and covered him for a long time, and then saw him ascend the throne. And anticipating there might be some kind of sort of bumps along the road with that kind of what they call the transition at the palace. How do you think do you think we're seeing a different Charles now that he's king?
I do, but I think he's as I say, I think he's managed that transition really rather well, and he has made sure that he, in many instances, operates the same sort of working pattern that his mother did. If she would have been in Balmoral at that time of year, he'll make sure he's there, and clearly a lot of his duties as head of state he carries out in the same way as she did. But I think he's also brought something new to the monarchy, and people at the palace hate me for saying this. I like to describe him as an activist monarch. And I don't mean a political activist in the sense of somebody who is being divisive and going down one particular path that a lot of other people won't like. I think he's very careful to try to achieve consensus and to use his convening powers to bring people together. But I think he is a king who wants the monarchy to make a difference to people. He wants to make Britain and the world a better place while he's on the throne.
And I suppose he did so much of that activism as Prince of Wales, being the longest serving Prince of Wales, that once he became king, I remember the palace sort of saying that he couldn't really stop and pretend to be someone completely different. He was never going to be that kind of blank sheet that the Queen was when she ascended the throne at that young age of 25. So he didn't really have much of a choice, but he's made that kind of segue quite well.
He has. And I think, you hear this from members of the royal family and their advisors quite a lot. They always talk about the need to be authentic. And so he can't switch and be something completely different, but he has adapted. And so, now you see him at a meeting with somebody about climate change. Say, for example, I think when we were in Paris on the state visit last year, and President Macron is talking about climate change, and the king is just nodding his head and smiling. He's not getting involved in the debate in the same way that he used to do. I mean, I can remember there was this phase for about 5 years maybe where some of his advisors were saying, he's changed already. He's essentially operating as a king in waiting, and you'll find that he's not saying the controversial things that he used to say before. And I can remember a senior royal aide telling me that over lunch, and literally the next day he described climate change deniers as headless chickens.
Sticking to the...
No, he wasn't sticking to the script then, but I think he has toned it down a bit. Yeah. But another phrase I've used, and I can't remember, I probably got it from one of his aides at some point, or maybe I've invented it, is a more muscular monarchy. I think he... we see that he's determined to try to heal some of the divisions in our society over the legacy of slavery and empire in a way that perhaps his mother wasn't.
Yeah, he's not shying away from those issues, is he? He's prepared to kind of roll up his sleeves and kind of get involved in that respect.
No, that's right.
But given that this year has been marked by the cancer diagnosis that was announced in February, do you think there's a danger of him kind of going back to work too soon? Is he overdoing it? Do you think part of that is his need, his desire to be seen to be king? How do you think that's all been handled?
Well, I mean, he's a workaholic. I mean, his son's for I think it was for his 75th birthday. They did certainly there was a documentary not so long ago where both his sons talked about him. It might have been for his 70th birthday actually, where both of his sons talked about the fact that they'd find him asleep at his desk, in the early hours of the morning. That he, I think the legacy of his workaholism and obviously the other things that went on with his marriage to Princess Diana they've got their legacy in the way William and Harry operate as well. And, obviously we see William is determined to put his family first and not be out working day in, day out, 7 days a week.
Speaking about the boys, obviously we had Harry here this week, didn't we? And Prince William's out doing his duties as the Duke of Cornwall. Do you think that there will be a kind of a chance at which Charles can catch up with Harry? Because it seemed unusual, didn't it, this week that we didn't see Harry meet the king, And
well, I'm glad you said that because I'd said that I thought that they would meet, and so I was really surprised, and I really haven't got to the bottom of what's gone on. I don't know if you have, but because when Harry came over in February, they did meet for between 30 and 45 minutes at Clarence House, and people close to the king, friends, said they really were very reluctant to talk about what they spoke about and how it all went, but sort of pointed to the fact that the king was seen smiling as he left Clarence House, I think he was going back across to Buckingham Palace and then flying off to Sandringham, if I remember rightly. And he appeared to be very pleased that his son had come over to see him. Now, what's gone on since that made him so reluctant to meet him these last few days? I just haven't got to the bottom of it. I mean, could it perhaps have been that he did a television interview and talked about his father afterwards? Or is it the fact that he was going on with Meghan to Nigeria and the king didn't, and the institution didn't want to send mixed messages because this is clearly a private trip? Harry is not representing the British monarchy. He's not representing the UK.
Well, he could go to Nigeria and say, well, I met with my father and he's doing well, or, there's any opportunity for him, I suppose, to reveal perhaps the details. I'd be amazed if he revealed the details of his meetings with the king at this stage, given everything that's gone on. But even the fact of saying, saw Dad and he's doing well.
My father sends his regards. It then implies that this is something more than it is, which is essentially just a private citizen's, two private citizens' trip to Nigeria.
Nevertheless, billed as a kind of pseudo-royal official tour because they've got a reporter out there with them who's sending information back. There are media opportunities for those pictures out there. So obviously this is part of, it's a very public visit. It's not, they're not going to catch up with friends or, taking the sights in that way. That's interesting, Richard, because that drawing the link between not seeing the king and the Nigeria trip is perhaps something that needs to be explored, because that could very well be one of the sensitivities behind not meeting.
Yes, yeah. I mean, we are just speculating because, in my experience anyway, this week, the Buckingham Palace has been very reluctant to speak about it at all.
Yeah, I don't want to get drawn into it. So, first year, lots of speculation, lots of talk about Harry. But is that fair? I mean, the king has now kind of operating this sort of slimmed-down monarchy. But like you say, describe it as a more muscular monarchy. And we've seen the people who are there at the centre of it doing, working very hard. Obviously, the Princess of Wales is sadly unable to take part in her public duties, which we all know about because of her health conditions. But Prince of Wales is now out. He was in Cornwall yesterday. He's in the Isles of Scilly today at the time that we're recording this. And he seems to be doing quite a lot. And obviously, Princess Anne with her trip to Canada. Do you think this can work with just a few really key players doing things, sort of more impactful things, if you like, than, lots and lots of minor royals cutting ribbons across the country?
I mean, this is what I find really interesting. I think, there's something really interesting to be said about how the monarchy changes now in the coming years. And, what we have seen, and this is, nobody's fault. I mean, it's just the way it's happened. But sadly, because of the King's illness and Kate's illness, we've seen the number of royal engagements really drop to only just above pandemic levels when they were prevented from going out for quite long periods. And I think that is significant. And in some ways, I think we might be seeing a dress rehearsal for the future of the monarchy. I mean, if you push it forward 20 years, well, who might be there? There might be just King, Queen, and 3 children, and possibly not many others, because you just have to look at what's happening in monarchies across Europe. They're slimming down more and more, and I know
there's more of a European model then going forward. Do you think?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I have to say I was slightly surprised when the reign did change that the late Queen's cousins, Duke of Kent, Princess Alexandra, the Duke of Gloucester and the Duchess of Gloucester didn't use that as an opportunity to take a well-earned break. Really, you know, they've worked their socks off for the monarchy and really do a lot of the heavy lifting, or have done over the years.
The Duchess of Gloucester's actually done the reverse, hasn't she? She's stepped up and has often been a companion to Camilla at some of these events when she's had to go on solo public engagements while the king was away from duties.
Yeah, yeah. But, you know, we looked at the engagements the other week, last week.
Tell me about your brilliant story, because you totted up the amount of sort of hours and jobs that Princess Anne has done this year alone, and it was staggering.
Well, yeah, I mean, actually, it's a Canadian journalist called Patricia Treble who does the work, really, the hard work, and I just sort of wrote it up and interviewed
You're very
modest. Yeah, I mean, Princess Anne has accounted for roughly a third of all royal engagements
so far this year. By Princess Anne, who is 73.
73, exactly. I mean, she doesn't show much sign of slowing up at the moment, but things will have to change over the years. And I'm sure a lot of people would say that her style, her ribbon cutting style, if you like, is still very much needed. Charity groups, hospitals needing to be opened officially, whatever. There is demand for a member of the royal family to come along and just mark that occasion, or just give people a pat on the back for the good work they've been doing.
And we can see that recognised by the king, I think, because he's taken on 300 new charities. Okay, he's dropped some of the old ones that perhaps didn't fit the themes of his work quite so well, but he's sort of taking on more. I mean, he's not going to be able to go around and be a kind of patron to all of them in person, but obviously he recognises, you know, the name on the letterhead is hugely important to charities when they're fundraising, when they're doing any of that sort of thing. So
yeah, I mean, it's sort of the gold standard for charities. It means that they've been checked out properly, that they are trusted by the very peak of the establishment, the royal household and the royal family. There is controversy about this. There was a report that came out a couple of years ago, if I remember rightly, suggesting that having a royal patron made no financial difference whatsoever to a charity. I find that a bit difficult to believe, because I certainly know that individual members of, the Duke of York is not exactly the most popular member of the royal family, but when he was a working royal, I've spoken to people who said, he just rang up a bunch of friends, wealthy friends, and said, I've got this charity project and we need to, I'm helping with this charity project. We need to raise £1 million, and they did it.
The power of the role, I guess.
Yeah.
But talking about that kind of reshuffle of, charities, that some of which belong to the late Queen, some of which belong to the late Prince Philip, all been kind of shuffled around. But obviously there's those military roles as well. So on Monday we're going to see quite something. We're going to be seeing a rare joint engagement with the King and the Prince of Wales, as the King hands over the colonelcy of the Army Air Corps to his elder son. Of course, it's the regiment which Harry used to be associated with when he was serving with the British Army. Well, how significant do you think that is? That's going to be on Monday when we see King and Prince of Wales together. And do you think that Harry's going to look on from Nigeria or wherever he'll be at that point and think, do you know what, I should have stayed?
It's hard to see at the moment that he regrets his move. I can't imagine that he's going to come back now, I have to say, and I think they'll stay together. Maybe privately they'll have regrets, but I don't think we'll ever hear about them publicly from him. I think the thing about that role is that although Charles, as Prince of Wales, was Colonel-in-Chief for 31 years, it's easy to imagine that had Harry stayed as a working royal, he might well have been made colonel-in-chief of the Army Air Corps. It would have been a natural fit because he had the credibility. He'd been an Apache helicopter pilot with that unit, gone out, served in Afghanistan, would have been popular with the troops. William, I'm sure they're delighted to have William, but you'd think it must stick in Harry's throat a bit to see his brother get that position. Of course, it was announced in August, so he would have had plenty of time to get used to it. But again, it just seemed a little bit bizarre to me that the palace announced while Harry was back in the UK that this ceremony would be taking place on May the 13th. And it feels a bit like a humiliation for Harry, and that somebody's sort of sticking the knife in.
Wow, lots to look forward to. Busy summer. We've told the King's not going to have a full summer schedule, but he's already doing quite a lot. What are your kind of crystal ball predictions for what we'll see him take part in? It looks like he's set for Royal Ascot. There'll be some sort of D-Day commemoration coming from the King, and
yeah, I'll be surprised if he doesn't go over to Normandy for the D-Day anniversary, because it's such a big thing, and there's such a small number of veterans left now. This is probably, we've been there before. 10 years ago, I was at, I think it was 10 years ago, the last march of the Normandy Veterans Association, and we thought then that we might never see veterans going out there again, and yet here they are, a small hardy group of them. So I'd be surprised if he doesn't go to that. And Royal Ascot, well, he went every day last year, didn't he? Will he do the same this time? It's such an important part of the royal calendar. I'm not sure it means an awful lot to people outside of horse racing, but I would expect there to be a pretty big royal turnout from the family for that. And
when we're looking forward to the second anniversary of the coronation next year, do you think we'll see a dramatically different picture? We might see, hopefully, the King return to duties and everything will be well. But
yeah, obviously it depends on the prognosis. The mood music, as both you and I have put it in writing, coming out of the palace, is that the King is responding well to his treatment, and there are grounds for cautious optimism, I think, is possibly one of the phrases often used at this stage. I think so. I do think, just going back to really, I suppose, the start of our conversation, that he inevitably, his reign has been blown off course by these two illnesses, these two cancer diagnoses, and
his and Kate's.
His and Kate's, yes. So I would hope, for their sakes, that by the second anniversary, everything's back on course again.
And any last thoughts on Harry? Do you think, with regards to being at the Invictus Games, if it's held in Birmingham in 2027, he'll be coming back? And we saw him really kind of being embraced by Diana's family, didn't we, at the service by Charles Spencer and, his mother's family. Do you think, and then he gave an interview to the BBC saying, that he's glad to be back in the UK. Are we going to see more of Harry back here, do you think? And that connection with the Spencers?
Yes, the Spencers hugging him brought back memories of Earl Spencer's speech at Diana's funeral.
Yes, which was quite something.
It was, yeah. My bet is that we will see more of Harry, not least because he's just appointed a UK PR person. And I think clearly there's recognition, or I see it as recognition, that they've got an awful lot of work to do now to win back the affection of the majority of the British public. Clearly they've got their supporters over here, particularly younger people and non-white people, but they've got a lot of work to do, and I suspect.
Watch this space then.
Yes.
Well, thank you, Richard. You've been watching Royal Confidential with me, Kate Mancy, and you can find more of my work in the Times or subscribe for more royal news. But just want to say thank you so much, Richard, because it always a pleasure to talk to you because you have such great insight and an incredible memory for things going back many, many years. So appreciate it. And for now, goodbye.